Hello, welcome. I'm welcoming all of you. I'm not putting the people who just walked in the door on the spot. So I think I need to say, welcome, pleasure people. Wow, right? And welcome, pleasure panelists. Really. Thank you for coming this evening. My name is Carole Clements. Some of you may know me, some of you may not. I am faculty here at Naropa University, and I teach in the contemplative psychology program, the undergraduate program here. And for the last 3 years, I've been teaching for quite a long time, but for the last 3 years, I've had the luxury of teaching courses in dynamics of intimate relationships and erotic intelligence. So it's been, I think, a real budding passion for me. And as a result of that work, I've met some amazing students and also some extraordinary colleagues. So one of the things I've learned about kind of making my foray into this world is just how interdisciplinary it is. And within the field of human sexuality, there are so many different lenses. So you might look at it through an anthropological lens, or a sociological lens, a psychology lens, a medical lens, a dancing lens, a sex worker lens, so that it's a field that really invites a vast array of people with many different experiences, many different views, all kind of willing to play together, I think I might say. And one of the things also that struck me about being in this field, welcome, hello, is sometimes the absence of pure pleasure, which is rather ironic, I think. But really, what we're looking to do here tonight is to invite in pleasure, to talk about pleasure, to hopefully experience pleasure together. And so I think I'll just stop there and begin, as everyone gets settled, with a Naropa tradition, which is our warrior's vow. Is anybody new to Naropa? Has anybody never done the vow before? Wonderful. Okay. So know that this is an invitation. It's not required, you don't have to do it, but it's simply an invitation. So I want to take the time just to explain it a little bit. So essentially the warrior's vow, it's called the warrior's vow, not because we're looking to be aggressive and enter into warfare, but because we're brave enough to have open, tender hearts. So it comes from our lineage. Shogun Rinpoche kind of gave us this offering, and we do it at the beginning of classes, the beginning of meetings, both in the beginning and ending of all of our time together. And it has 3 parts. And the first is actually if you would just kind of take a posture that feels uplifted to you. So you're just kind of arriving in your bodies and with one another. And so notice actually when you take the posture, you might feel more a connection to what is above and what is below, that you're the kind of human conduit to bring together the heaven and the earth energies. And when we take this more upright posture, you might notice that something just happened to your chest area, your heart center, which is it may have become more open than it was. I know I have a tendency to kind of hunch over, particularly if I'm really intense about something. And when I take the time to simply sit, I find that the heart area opens. And that's actually the second part of the vow, which is to acknowledge our own openness and our own extraordinary vulnerability. And that again, this is an act of being brave enough to be that open, that vulnerable. And for us tonight, I'll say that aroused, like that present, that you can actually feel kind of your body sometimes a pulsing throughout it, and that we're here to do that together, and it's okay. And then the final part of the vow is when we just extend it. we extend it as an offering to ourselves and others. So we'll do that together. I'm going to ring the bell and we will bow. So think of those three parts of the bow, and then we will do that together. Wonderful, thank you. So I want to introduce our pleasure panelists. Really thrilled that you're all here this evening. Thank you again. And for those of you who came in a little later, I just wanted to also extend a warm welcome to all of you as our pleasure people. And I'm here to serve as a bit of a moderator, but that's also going to be extended to each of you with questions that arise after the panelists have spoken and we start getting into some pleasure talk. Okay? So I'd like to begin by introducing Jenna Noah. They're also going to introduce themselves more thoroughly. I'll say briefly that Jenna and I met I think last week, for the first time face-to-face, and it was an amazing moment. So thank you. And Jenna is a graduate of the, I know always MACP, I'm a graduate of that too, but the Master's in Contemplative Psychology. Okay, Contemplative Counseling Psychology, that's what it is.
It's changing to MACCP, but when I graduated, it was MACCP.
Okay, so from our Master's in Contemplative Psychology, Jenna is a graduate. She's also the founder of Boulder Burlesque, and their what is that called? Tagline. Their tagline is "Where the profane is sacred." Love that tagline. So Jenna will be talking more about what she has to bring here. She's also a PhD candidate in sexual embodiment. So welcome, Jenna. Thank you. Maybe I'll go down the whole, let's go down the whole line and then you'll each have a time to say a little bit more. How about that? So Monique Darling. Monique, where do you come from?
All
over.
I grew up in Utah and just recently moved back, but I'm only there like 5 days out of the month, so I'm really everywhere.
Great. So Monique just arrived today, and this is your first visit to Naropa, correct? Wonderful. And so we're going to hear a little bit more about Monique's lineage, actually, and how it has something to do also with Naropa's lineage. And Monique is an authenticity and vulnerability coach. Awesome. Thank you. Welcome. And we have next Elizabeth Wood. Elizabeth, what do I say about you? So she and Dan, is it okay if I introduce you somewhat together, a little bit? Dan and Elizabeth are partners, and I had the pleasure, actually this panel is here because of Dan and Elizabeth. There was a three-way, that's how I was thinking of it, a very pleasurable three-way when I was driving, and I was so excited that I had to pull off the side of the road. I was on the phone with both of them, and we were discussing pleasure. And so I literally pulled out. Do you remember I did that? It was like their excited voices were coming through my new car stereo. So it got a little hot in the car and I had to pull over. I thought I was going to crack up, literally. And so anyway, they've been colleagues probably who I met really when I began teaching erotic intelligence. They heard about the class from a student who was taking the class at that time, reached out to me, and it's really been a love affair ever since. They created together Beyond the Bedroom, and Dan is the executive director of that, and Elizabeth, you are the
Pleasure educator.
The pleasure educator, yes, of course you are. Of course you are. Wonderful.
What are your title?
It's a great title. It fits you perfectly. It fits you very well. So I'm going to let them talk more about themselves. It's too juicy for me to kind of introduce. So I'll let you talk later, a little bit more. And then Deb Azorsky, who I've known for a very long time. Thrilled to have Deb here. Deb is a psychotherapist in private practice here, specializing in couples and sexuality, which is fabulous. Also teaches in the Graduate School of Psychology, the Masters in Transpersonal Psychology, Human Sexuality, and Professional Orientation. Wonderful. So thrilled to have you here this evening as well. Thank you. So I think before we let the panelists speak, the last thing I want to do by way of invitation is to invite for ourselves inclusivity. To invite for ourselves the different aspects of ourselves and the difference that is here in the room. To move beyond the gender binary of male and female, which we tend to look at somebody and presume we know what gender they identify with. So wanting to move beyond that. Wanting to move beyond notions of that every couple would be monogamous, to move beyond that. That's fine if you are, but you also don't have to be, right? So just that we're kind of inviting in a wide circle, and that everybody is invited fully to be who you are in this space together. So, thank you. So I will let each of you talk. I'm going to time you somewhat, and kind of introduce yourselves a little further. And then for our pleasure people, I think it might be nice to say, how did you land in this work that you're doing? Did you choose it? Did it choose you? Like, how did you get here? I thought might be an interesting way to start.
The first thing I'd like to do is offer to have you guys come a little bit closer to us because
feels so far away. So, how are you guys going to share these mics and you can also grab and move up and coordinate that are speaking, so it's maybe 6 inches. Going to be. I have something to say. Maybe universes. But yeah, so you guys can just show these in and introduce that point, just so you know 6 inches.
So I'll begin. My name is Jenna Noah. I am a graduate of this university. Graduated a few years ago, actually. And in my time at Naropa, I started a burlesque dance troupe. And some of you may know me in that capacity. When I'm on stage, my name is Madame Mercy. And I lead a group. It varies in size, just depending on the time of year. And we do what's called conscious burlesque. So we explore body image, we explore sexuality, vulnerability, intimacy on stage. And some people put on pieces that are really particular to them, like particular to their divorce, where one woman stripped off her wedding dress. It was like a very symbolic piece. So we are doing burlesque, and we're sort of taking a little twist on the traditional tassel. And it's a lot of fun. I also lead workshops, burlesque workshops, and draglesque workshops here. I lead a group that's called Sex Talk once a month. Really fun, just open conversation about sexuality and intimacy. And I'm currently pursuing my PhD, which is really tough in sexuality, and it's a distance learning program. So that's a little bit about me. And then how this work found me, or I found it, is such a good question. I was in a program, my contemplative psychology program. We didn't have any coursework in sexuality, and that for me was a really was very frustrating. And my cohort was very dynamic and sensual and cuddly, and we were a very active group, and somehow there was this energy that just didn't have a place to go. So one year I was on meditation retreat, as we do in the contemplative tradition, and I was like, I want to do this. I want to create a dance troupe that can express different parts of sexuality, and I didn't really know what it was going to turn into at all. And it unfolded, and it still continues to surprise me in really amazing ways, but it's evolved a lot and changed a lot over time. And from that experience and the dance practice, I think it's allowed me to step more fully into my own body, my own embodiment as a sexual being in this culture, and also bring that into my therapeutic work in a way that feels really beneficial for people. And so Yeah, I live here locally, and I'm glad to be here tonight. Thanks.
So I'm Monique Darling, and I am the founder of Juicy Enlightenment. And so I'll start a little bit with my journey because that's where it started for me. And I grew up in Utah, very, very religious background, and had pretty much any type of abuse that you can imagine, I had. And my voice was shut down, my body was shut down. I was still like overachiever, and so I got married, had 3 kids, and was just miserable. And I decided to go out in the world and find there had to be something else there. And for me, it was cuddle party. And I went to my very first cuddle party, and it was like, oh, there's other people like me in the world. And so that was 8 years ago, and then it took me 3 years to finally become a facilitator myself. But over the last 5 years, then I've done over 800 workshops, like all over the country and Canada, and just like dove into this world wholeheartedly. And what Carole had talked about is I've studied Tantra, and my Tantra lineage is Mahamudra. And so that was passed down from Taloka to Naropa. And so I was so excited when the panelists said, let's talk at Naropa. I said, let's do a panel, because I often do that at the places that I go to. So I'm so in gratitude to be here tonight. And the deepest thing that I love to share is around being able to dive in to our vulnerability and our authenticity and be able to be raw with each other. But even more than that is to be raw and authentic with ourselves. And if we can look in the mirror and be able to look at all the pieces of ourselves and be able to accept and love us, then it's so much easier to be able to do that with everyone around us. And so when that starts, it starts here. And so we're going to show you, there's a few exercises. We have some surprise exercises for you tonight for anyone that wants to do them that will really help you to embody that. Because for me, that's what pleasure is in our bodies. So thank you for having me here tonight.
Hi everyone, I'm Elizabeth Wood. I'm delighted to be here, and I'm delighted that we brought up so much pleasure in Carole during that first phone conversation. So my journey is a little bit different. I actually trained and worked as a sex therapist for a number of years in Chicago. And while I love it, and I'm so appreciative of all the fabulous therapists out there, something was missing for me. And working from the medical model of sexual dysfunction, and that's when the DSM-4 was out there. So now, is there just the DSM-5? So the DSM-4 had 4 definitions of sexual dysfunction. And I wanted to bring more play into my office with my clients, but there's a certain standard and a certain way that you interact with your clients as a clinician. And I thought, maybe I want more. So I actually studied for my own personal journey, and as well as some professional wisdom. I took my first Tantra class. And there are many in here who were part of that first Tantra class, and a couple out there. And I was hooked. I enjoyed the touch practices. I thought not only for myself, how might this change the way that I do therapy? And I actually decided, after diving really deep into more touch practices, I decided to willingly give up my license. So I no longer practice sex therapy. I am a pleasure policewoman. I help people embody their orgasm, expand their orgasm, basically expand the sensation in their bodies. And I met Dan at that first Tantra weekend, and now we're a couple that work together. We're married, and we have a business.
She's worried that she sees the smile on my face, and she knows I'm going to say something.
I don't know what he's going to say, but I'll just let it go. I'll surrender it, and I'll be vulnerable because I'm next to you. So, we do have a business called Beyond the Bedroom, where we're trying to bring sex education and intimacy and relationship to the general public. Because without this education, without information, I don't believe people have the opportunity to make the most informed choice for whatever wants to happen in the privacy of their own bedrooms. So I call myself a sex educator and a personal intimacy coach. So I'll turn it over to Dan now. Oh, what brought me here? You want to know the truth? A tiny 82-year-old South African woman she was inviting all of the recent social work graduates to come and participate in a training course so that we clinicians could talk about sex therapy, or just sex, with the clients that came into our room. And I thought, what is Thanksgiving going to be like if I took that class? Hey, Dad, I've learned some new words. So I'm a provocateur, and my dad is kind of this stiff British, gentleman, and I was pass the turkey. Let's talk about masturbation. I've learned some new words, and I just pushed the limits with my family, and my parents love the fact that I do what I do, and they are the life of the party in addition to, myself when I get to talk about what I do. So I'm thrilled to be here. And I have to thank Dr. Demeter Renshaw, who used to run the sex therapy clinic in Chicago at Loyola University, because she's a mighty one, and she kept me there, and she kept me engaged. So I'm here because of her.
Now I know why they didn't invite us to Thanksgiving. And she is the pleasure police. We have handcuffs at home to prove it. I told you I'd say something would get her. I actually came into this business because it came to me. I was in the corporate world. I'm a software engineer. My background, I have an MBA. I started several companies, and I wasn't fulfilled in the corporate world. And I didn't even know sex therapy existed. I didn't, I was married. We were not understanding what was going on. We would go to therapists, and it seemed like they were always siding with one of us or the other, but they never talked about sex with us. And I really didn't know anything about it. I finally got divorced, and I met a woman who introduced me to the world of Tantra. And I thought, oh my God, where was this in my life? I was 41 when I learned about this, and I was pissed. It's like, how come I didn't learn this? I grew up in the South. I'm from Florida originally. And I was really upset about this. It's like, how come nobody told me about this? How come nobody told me that pleasure existed, that we can have pleasure, that we even have permission to have pleasure? Sure, we saw the pleasure from sexuality that we see in porn and stuff that we see in some of the movies, but that really wasn't real for me. So when I learned that, being the engineer, I wanted to know everything there was about it. So I started exploring, digging in, getting books, taking courses. I probably got a PhD with the level of courses that I've taken in the last decade to be where I'm at this point in time. And I started Beyond the Bedroom because I thought, this is stupid. I've taken so many classes, people need to know what's available. And I have no judgment as far as what somebody wants to do or not do, but let me provide them an education so they can make a choice for themselves as to what works. If you're a swinger, if you're in a BDSM, I really don't care. I'll bring in the teachers that are the experts in that area. You can learn from them in a very safe environment. And if you decide that that's for you, great. You now have a person as a contact that you can go to learn more. Or I can point you in a direction because I know lots and lots of people now. Or you can take classes with us because I've learned so many things that we're out there teaching as well. I also do, I wouldn't say it's a new brand of work. If anybody's seen the movie The Sessions, I do something called surrogate partner therapy, providing a source for women specifically that have never had an opportunity like this before in a safe place to learn about it. And so I provide that. So that's what brought me here, and thank you for having us here. Thank you. I'm so glad that you said I'll have to give you calls more often. But thank you for having us here.
So I'm Deb Azorsky, and I've had some time now that you've all spoken to figure out how did I get here. And I think one of the things that happened to me that felt pretty instrumental in my sort of being in the transpersonal counseling program, and like when I started that program, I started my master's program, I was doing in gerontology. Like, yeah, right? And then somewhere along the way, I took this very kind of severe turn in a very different direction. And it happened because I had an opportunity from one of my professors. I was working, doing kind of a practice session. And one of the people I was working with was sort of dealing with a lot of sexual stuff. And he brought that in. And via my instructor, my professor, with his encouragement, he said, I think you need to kind of ask him about his penis. And I was like, fuck, really? Okay. And this huge thing opened up, and this profound opportunity for him and me to kind of dive into this work. And I realized after that was practice session was done, that I think I've always found myself in a place where I am creating safe places for people to talk about things that are really hard to talk about. And I thought, oh, because I could think back on my life, I thought, oh, it happened here, and it happened here, and here it was happening again. And I just went with it, and I just followed it. And I ran into lots of different challenges, and had to work with all of my own judgments and biases and all the things that sort of have helped me become who I am as a sex therapist and a psychotherapist. And I sort of never looked back. So, sort of that opportunity, that kind of profound journey that just woke me up right in the moment, and bless that my other classmate for showing up and being willing to bring his stuff. And so I think the other thing I was thinking about is, you know, in my practice today, what happens is I do the same thing. I was gonna, you know, when you talk about pleasure, I was like, I see more people who come in who look at me sort of dumbfounded when I present the possibility that actually pleasure can exist in their sexual intimacy with themselves or with each other. And I find that it's a bit of a road, right? There's a lot of unpacking, a lot of baggage that has to happen in order for them to even get to a place where they can relax in their body and sort of imagine or reimagine that they could be and feel pleasure again. So it's a hugely rewarding and difficult sometimes to hear all that we've all gone through, I think, to undo the cultural, societal crap that gets, you know, handed down to us or put out there that we begin to believe in, to get to a place of knowing that there is something bigger, greater, broader, more fulfilling, loving, exciting, fun, funny, play. When I say play, look, some of my clients will say, like, when was the last time you had sex and it was playful? And they, you know, they're like, huh? Playful? And so it's really, I feel blessed. I feel blessed that I got here and blessed I'm here. I'm so psyched to be here with all of you. And I've known Carole. I'm loving meeting these two right now. We're doing lots of work together, and it's just, it's sort of a wonderful opportunity. So,
actually, my first question, and then I think we'll open it up, but you said something, Deb, and I was noticing kind of some energy too from the panelists. I wanted to begin by confronting the word pleasure, actually, and kind of unpacking it and having our panelists think about it and speak to it more directly. And to begin, I wanted to read a quote from Ecstasy is Necessary, which some of my students in the room know. It's a textbook for intelligence, and Barbara Carellis is the author of that work. And she says here, she actually did a very informal study on Facebook and with her Facebook friends and Twitter followers, asking them about their ecstatic experiences, which she saw as being pleasurable experiences, and not one respondent mentioned the word pleasure, not one. And it led her to really kind of chew more deeply on what pleasure means, and she uses the word ecstatic, like ecstatic experiences, and she says here, so I want to, just for the purposes of our first kind of chew, if we could imagine pleasure and ecstatic experiences maybe being the same. So ecstasy or pleasure is not a feel-good or just good fun experience. Ecstatic or sexually pleasurable experiences disassemble us in some significant ways and swirl our pieces back together again in new configurations. So I wanted you all to kind of chew and swirl and respond to that. By the way, none of them know what I'm going to ask, so they're not prepared. I feel pleasure needs to arise in the moment, as do their responses.
I'm going to say a few words just to start about this. I love this quote. There's this idea, or it appears to me that in the therapeutic world, there's this idea that it has to be hard, or that when you're working with certain energies, the goal is to go deep, go hard, and to feel it all in this way that can feel a little punitive to the body, a little punitive to the self. And there's another whole brand of thought that really emphasizes that pleasure and pleasurable experiences can actually be one of the key forces in transformation. And so when I think about this quote and I think of this disassembly of self in a way, and this reconfiguration, there's something that kind of relaxes in me that it doesn't have to be as difficult as I think sometimes we make it.
Well, I have something awesome to add. So what I want you guys to think is, what is the opposite of pleasure? And don't say it out loud, just think in your head for a minute. What have we been told is the opposite of pleasure? And I'm going to invite you to set that down for a minute. You can pick it back up if you want. But just imagine, just for a second, what if the opposite of pleasure was even more pleasure? And just see how that feels in your body. And so if you have this pleasurable experience and you reset that as a new reference point for you, and you're not looking for the opposite to be anything else other than more pleasure, then you're just open to even more. And so then you have this other peak experience, and then you're open to something more. And so each time that you open to pleasure, you're opening more pleasure. And so it's just this awesome concept to be able to allow your body to experience continuous more and more and more pleasure, and just keep opening to more. And so the greatest thing that I have to offer any of my clients or lovers or workshop people are just slow down. Pleasure happens when you're able to actually be there in the moment and feel it. And so sex isn't hard. Sex is easy. It's the stuff that comes before sex and the stuff that comes after sex. But if you're able to be right there in the moment, whether it's sex, whether it's life, whether it's a relationship, that's easy. And so that's, for me, that is extreme pleasure. It's being right there, right here, here, here.
So that we don't go down the line. Anyone else want to jump in?
I can jump in. I think one of the things that occurs to me in that, both for you said, Monique, and the quote, if it's about breaking apart, right, then to me, once that has happened, so you've faced into that, whatever that fear is of letting yourself break apart, then yeah, how easy is it to just know, oh yeah, that's what that feels like, been there, done that, oh, there's more, and I can find a place of comfort with that knowing of what it feels like to be in that ecstasy. And I think, again, our culture has a tendency to, we tighten up in our bodies, right? We clamp down. And it's pretty hard to experience pleasure, when you're like this, or your pelvis is like that, and really hard. So what does it mean to start to let all of that go?
And I think also culturally, we thrive on this notion of, no pain, no gain. What's the thing that they say of Mary Jane? No pain, no Jane. It's like that we have to work really hard, practically drive ourselves and ground, to reach success, to climb up that ladder. And so it's all twisted. It's, you know, all the news is about tragedy and setback. And they don't, you know, actually in my therapy office, when I was a therapist, people didn't come to see me when they were really happy and wanted to share their joy. So, I mean, we're kind of a culture that thrives on that contraction, whatever it might be. So what I like to say in the work that I do is I want things to break apart. I lived in Hawaii for a short time, and we would crack open that coconut. And I don't care how much they would open, but just allowing some of that light in. The other metaphor that I use is you come in with yourself all as, you know, this perfect puzzle piece. Well, my goal is to throw all the pieces up in the air, and then after the work that we do, I definitely send you home with every single solitary piece, but we're going to see what kind of new configuration it comes in. And that new configuration is created through the pleasure principle. Where did we mess that up? The pleasure principle, it's so easy. It really is easy to play, but it's so emotionally complex. So anybody that has fun with their puppy dog, or their tiny kitten, or their children, that's the concept. And that innocence of play that, because of our often tough world, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, we've lost that. So I'm really happy that we can shake and quake and reconfigure with this really lovely energy of play, innocence, and pleasure.
Yeah, I really like that quote as well, because for me, growing up in the South, there's a lot of oppression there. It's right on the edge of the Bible Belt. So I grew up in the Space Coast, if anybody's heard of that. I guess somebody has. And you know, with the Southern Baptists that are down there, and I went to that church for a while, you know, there's nothing around pleasure that is good. It's always pushed down as, no, we shouldn't be doing that. You should be giving everything to, you know, other beings. And when you disassemble that and you really play with the pleasure, so much more opens up. It's rampant in our world. It's not just the Bible Belt itself. Recently, I went to a conference for sex therapists, educators, and counselors, and I was in a class with Carole, where the presenter talked about the sensate-focused exercises that Masters and Johnson had created back in the 60s and 70s. And at the end, she left 10 minutes aside for people to practice those exercises. You should have seen the fear in these people's eyes. So, okay, 10 minutes, we can do this in either dyad or individually. And people's eyes just got big, and they looked at us and individually. And then they asked questions to the point where nobody actually did the exercises, except me, Carole. But now they weren't able to disassemble, even for their own practice, and the people that they are there to help around their sexuality, their pleasure, and it's really shut down even there. And so I find that really sad. But it does really take that to break apart for them so that they can open that up for the people that they're seeing as well.
Fantastic. Delicious, actually. When you answered the way you did, what is the opposite of pleasure? Pause. More pleasure. I hadn't read the whole quote of Barbara Carolus. Do you happen to know her? You do know Barbara. Okay. It was terrific because she talks here, she says here, I have this, an ecstatic experience can shatter the glass ceiling of our limited possibilities, revealing a new unexplored galaxy. Paradoxically, not only will such an experience expand the totality of our possibilities, but expanding the totality of our possibilities will also increase our capacity for more ecstatic experience. So I think you're all speaking to that, and the shattering actually that is somehow required in this work of pleasure, relearning pleasure, maybe, or applying it in this arena. And you might have talked about this because I thought I heard it a little bit, but I'm curious, what what you in your kind of disciplines and in your areas see as impediments to pleasure and how it actually shows up, maybe with some examples that you've worked with. So how kind of that moment, I have a friend who says, you know, right before the rocket breaks the barrier, right, that atmospheric barrier, it shakes like wildly, right? And kind of before that release, we all also can think orgasmically, you know, there's this like all of this tension that's like really building. And sometimes it doesn't break through. So I'm curious about, in your experiences, what you've seen at that edge of tension and how you work with that.
I can start. So for me, it's a lack of education. We don't. When I was in, I think, 5th grade, I'm 50, but when I was in 5th grade, the nurse with the white hat. The nurse with the white hat came into the classroom, and you know, seriously, there was a nurse's office. I don't even think schools have nurse's office. Although you guys have a lactating room. That is like uber cool. I want to go school where there's a lactating room. So maybe that's where the nursing fund went. Oh, hey, that's pretty funny, the nursing. Anyway, so the nurse with the white hat came in, and it was really clinical. And it was all about, certainly, don't touch, don't look, and don't enjoy. You know, so we're like all, you know, scared and frightened, and, you know, diseases and photographs of diseases, and if you get pregnant, the door's going to be locked, and you have to, you know, your mother's going to send you somewhere else, all that kind of stuff. And it's really, for me, and the people that we see, and the people that are drawn to our classrooms, is they want the information. And they don't know where to get it. And one of the things that I love to say is porn is fine for recreational purposes, but as an educational tool, it's just, it sets up false expectations everywhere. I mean, there are not many bodies that look like that, and there are not many that look like that. Let's be honest, they're specifically chosen. But so many of the younger folk that are coming in, that's where they get their education. And then people my age, you know, well, since we only have the nurse with the white hat and the box, that's where they're now looking for their information. And so basically, I find myself that it's really, I'm an educator. I had 2 Stanford graduates come to see me. And, you know, people are, no, this is different. Oh, and gynecologists that I've seen. But these 2 Stanford grads met, fell in love, you know, got married when they were undergrads at Stanford. They've never had sex, never. And it was an unconsummated marriage for more than 2 years. I was like, you're smart. I mean, you went to Stanford. And they didn't know the first thing about sex. So that's when I knew that I'm like, that's what I've got to do. I've got to teach people. I've got to say, this is what this is what not, you know, to do. And that's basically what I do primarily, is I educate and I try to make it funny too. Because that's that whole play thing. At the end of the day, if this isn't fun, you know, I'm going to pack it in and, I don't know, maybe travel to Fiji. I've got to have fun with what I do, and I think that that puts a lot of people at ease. So that's mine.
So I would say with the clients that I work with, it's all in the mind. They cannot let go. They have been so indoctrinated in this cultural script that says we can't have pleasure, we can't have orgasm, we just can't even be with our own feelings, our own emotions. And when you can get past that, then they can. A couple of clients that I have right now, they're so in their mind about body image issues. One woman I'm working on was like, I just can't imagine somebody would be interested in me because I'm older, I'm 58, I'm not attractive, I've added some weight, I'm not as athletic as I used to be, and that has got her so in her mind that when it comes to pleasure, she can't feel it. And so I'm having to really, really work with her to just let go of everything. And I try to kind of overwhelm her with love and passion and pleasure to the point where she can't help but actually go with it. And I'm actually starting to break through with that. Another one is the same kind of thing. She's really in her mind and she thinks about it too much. And she's really focused on, like, well, this just doesn't seem normal, this doesn't seem right, what's going on. So if she can just get out of her mind, that's when she's going to be able to break through that better.
And how do you teach her that? What is your more than that? Give me a little more.
So, I mean, it depends on who I'm working with, but really, so the question was, how do I work through that with her specifically? And the way that I'm doing that is just relaxing and saying, look, there's no goal. We don't have to get to orgasm today, tomorrow, or even a year from now. It's all about the pleasure. Enjoy the feeling, and every time you get into your head, it's like doing a meditation. Every time you get into your head, notice that you're in your head, say, gee, thank you very much for being in my head now, let me let that go, and move on. And it's going to take a while. It's not something that you can just flip a switch and off you go.
I think that's great. I would go on the heels of that because I think one of the ways that I bridge my training with the sex therapy that I do is just with that mindfulness awareness piece. Because lots of people will float in and out of their heads, into their thinking. And just teaching clients to, just notice it. That's all you have to do. You don't judge it. And you just come back into your body. I mean, it's a high level of sexual experience, I think, to be that completely and utterly engaged with someone through an entire experience and not have your mind just sort of drift off for moments. But how do we come back? Like, we always get to come back. That's to me, that's what I put out. It's just the reality. To think that after not having a juicy sexual experience at all, or for the first time, or often in your sexual life with whomever your partner is, to then imagine, like, I lower the expectation of what's really going to happen. And it's like, it's all okay. Oh, so what if you drifted off into this room? It's a really ugly color. Just come back into your body without the judgment, because your body's right there, your breath's right there. And so I think that's probably one way that I work with it as well.
So for me, it's a little different because traditionally in my realms, we're not always doing talk therapy. I do that. But this is a really embodied practice as well. So when you're in a workshop, you can see in people's bodies where there's these contractions and these almost frozen parts. And it'll come up just between people and dynamics. Just like a week ago, someone was standing, so I was teaching a group piece to a group of people who are in a workshop of mine, and someone was doing this really sexy dance. Another person is standing like this. It was like, it really looks as though you're being arrested. And this person didn't really even notice it, actually, that he was so solid and rigid in form. And I really made a very public announcement, like, it's okay to feel pleasure. I mean, you're in a burlesque workshop, right? You'd think that this is the one place that that wouldn't be a limitation, or as was spoken earlier, in a room of sex therapists, you'd think that that would be a space where people would be willing to maybe make a little bit of contact for each other. But I think some of these things are really, really ingrained rather deeply, based on the culture, based on where we're from, based on our own backgrounds. But the body doesn't lie. Like your words, you can come in and say, oh, I am Madam Mercy, I am sexually advanced, and I am into this workshop, and I have this whole character. And your body will actually tell where you are with whatever you're creating. In our workshops, we have a lot of play because you're creating a whole character, you're creating a name, you're creating an identity, and none of it has to be real. And then parts of it end up being really, really deeply real, and hitting on places and people that they just didn't even really expect would come out in that realm, because it's a complete container of play. So it's a really incredible deep work, but yeah, these frozen bits, they come up in different ways. They come up verbally too when I'm leading a group process where you can see a blockage.
but I really like to go back to the body. If I went last, it would be easier. This is a hugely emotional topic for me, so excuse me if I get emotional. For me, as soon as Carole said the question, what came up for me is when I moved back to Utah about 2 months ago, I went in for a bikini waxing appointment. And it was the first time I went there in Utah, and what came up as we started talking about what I do is she was talking about all the young women that come into her, that like that's the night before they're going to get married. They haven't had any conversation at all with their parents about sexuality. Like that's the first conversation they're having about sex with her in the room, and it was okay to say, well, you know, you can't have hair. Like that's unacceptable, but it's like it was. We ended up being able to talk about a little pamphlet that we're going to create to be able to hand to these women. But it's so culturally indoctrinated in so many different places that it's not okay to talk about this. It's not okay to feel pleasure in our bodies or to talk about sex or to talk about these topics that we're talking about tonight. And I think that it is. I love that there's so many people that are saying, let's talk about this because it's so important. And the second piece that came up for me is as I started doing tantric practices, then I did a lot of pujas. And pujas are like connected exercises. And when I started doing them 5 years ago, every single one was gender balanced. And I had so many people calling me and writing me and saying, I have a partner that's the same gender, or I don't fit in either category. And so I started creating little circles so that they could have their own circle to be in. And eventually that's become a huge passion of mine to be able to say, no, everyone gets a number. You get to sit across from the person that you sit across from because we're all genders. Like, this is so beautiful. And then we play in that, and we play with it. We all have energetic cocks, and we all have energetic pussies, and just like getting to play in the fields that we're all inclusive. And so when Carole said that, I'm like, yes, that's such a blockage for people and being able to experience pleasure with each other because it's hard to be able to be on the same page. And one of the greatest examples was when I had a man sit across from another man in puja ceremony, and they were holding each other's tears. And so they traced tears down their face in at the ending circle. Then the man said, when I grew up, every time I cried, then my dad would beat me. And the man that was sitting across from me looked just like my dad. And that he was able to hold my tears from me and give me that space was more healing than anything that's ever happened. So for me, those are the places that we get to find, like it's just the everyday thing is going to go get waxed. And you get to have these conversations if you dare to talk about it, that where people are being stuck and that pleasure's okay across the board.
Something I was struck by. Yes, question, please. No, don't be sorry. Would you mind using the mic? Thank you, so everyone can hear.
I'm of the older generation, and I can remember when I was growing up, I found masturbation, and I found that part of my body that gives me pleasure as a child. And I remember doing that, and I remember enjoying it so much. And I remember, you know, I felt so good and happy and joy, and I'm doing this thing, and it's so good, you know. And my mom walked in, and she caught me, and I was slammed. So it was like, it wasn't explained to me what I was doing, or she had a name for it, or anything. It was, you're wrong about doing that. So, you know, my generation, we were taught a lot of shame. There was a lot of shame. For a woman, you know, good girls don't, and bad girls do. And you know, most of my life I lived like that. You know, and then finally when you do try to become intimate, you know, it's very hard. It's like, oh, all of a sudden now I'm supposed to switch, and it's okay. So for me, I had to practice, and I had to practice. And because of Tantra, and because of my partner over here that has helped me in so many ways of learning how to free myself and have much, much pleasure. And it's just, it's overwhelming, and I really do feel gratitude today on that. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. I'm happy to be here. So I'm a women's studies major, so I think often about women and sexuality and this culture and the media and porn and just how dangerous it is, or can be. And I've just been thinking a lot about this, just that I feel like a lot of sex in the media is really made towards like the male gaze, or like that it's not actually about a woman having pleasure, but it's depicted that way. And I guess I just wonder, I don't know how to start this conversation, you know, just talking to people about what's real and what's, I don't know, fantasy, and this idea that somehow like dangerous sex is the best sex, and that like, you know, you can be promiscuous and that it's totally empowered, but what if it's not, you know, and what if it is? But in my experience talking to women, it's not often the case. They're like, I was sleeping around because I felt like shit. That's it, you know, and then I'll talk to my male friends and they're like, oh yeah, women can totally sleep around and be empowered. I'm like, are you talking to the women? You know, and so I guess I'm just wondering, I don't know if I'm making much sense here, but I wonder if you have any thoughts on, I guess, women's sexuality in the media.
I was trying to give them a choice. You know, that's a really tough question. Because I agree with you, the way that porn portrays women having sex, the way our society in movies and everything else, it really isn't showing a realistic picture of what's going on. And I know women who are very empowered around their sex, and they have sex left and right, more than you would think of, you know, a true man having sex, something like that, you know, in our societal vision. And they're completely empowered around it. And then there's some women that are having sex left and right that are doing it because they're empty, there's something they're missing, and they're trying for something. I've got a client right now who has been beaten, raped by her husband, boyfriend that she's with. She's treated like crap. And she's very sexual. She really likes sex. But at this point in time, sex is not pleasurable for her. So I'm working with her to bring that out. It's like, yeah, you can have pleasure. Sex shouldn't be painful. You shouldn't be beaten because you don't want to do something or penetrated before you're ready to have something. Or if you're not ready for sex, just, that's okay. And she's not able to do that at this point in time. So that's, I see it both ways. It can happen, because I know people that are that way.
I also think it's a pretty tough question. I appreciate it, however. And I think one of the things, two things. One is in my human sexuality class, one of the things I've done is actually have, when I do have male students, enough male students in the class, I have the people who identify as male and the people who identify as female sit across from each other, begin to have more honest conversations. And so it starts right there. And there's so much emotion, just like Monique had with the woman in the waxing salon. I mean, it's the honesty and the conversation about what's really true, and the demythification of what the media puts out there, the sensationalization of that. I think the other thing, so that's one place to start, is with honest conversation. I think the other place is to, I think women themselves get to figure out what's true for them. And when we take that responsibility, and whenever that is, whether you only want to have sex with the person that you're in a monogamous relationship with, like no judgment, right? Or you're having lots of sex. With lots of different people. It doesn't matter, but that you are embodied with yourself and you know what you want and you're able to say yes and you're able to say no. I think that's, and I don't know if that's going to change. I don't know, maybe that's my idealism. like that's going to change something. Maybe it will. Maybe it will.
But through education, it might.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that Beyond the Bedroom is really striving to do, is educate people on what's available choice-wise and what makes sense for you. Like I said before, I have no judgment as to what works for somebody as long as they've been educated around it and choose for themselves.
And for me, that comes right back to cuddle party rules and like being able to really educate yourself. And so like the cuddle party rules, a few of them are if you're a yes, say yes. If you're a no, say no. And my favorite one of all is if you're a no, say maybe. And so as you start practicing saying, thank you. If you're a maybe, say no. See, I'm all excited about it. So yes, I'll never back. If you're a maybe, say no. And the reason for that is because we don't want to disappoint people, right? And so we'll say maybe or maybe later. And so then they come back over and ask you, 10 minutes later, hey, are you a yes now? And you're like, oh, maybe later. So they'll come back over 1 minute later and come ask. And you're just like, why aren't you getting a clue? And the thing is as you start being able to say, because like Jenna was saying, our bodies don't lie. So if you feel something wishy-washy inside of you, that's a maybe. And so if you're able to say no, it gives them time to go find someone else that is a yes right now, or it lets them let you off the hook either way. But it gives you time to feel in your body, oh, okay, if A, B, and C happen, I am a yes. Or even more important, oh, I guess I am a no to that, instead of having to discover that halfway during the activity that you suggested that you were a maybe. And so it's really giving your body an opportunity to find those reference points of what yes feels like, what no feels like, and what maybe feels like, so that you're able to answer from that empowered place. And that's helped a lot with the counsel, and it helped a lot in my life to be able to find those places. So around sexuality, around pleasure, around any aspect of my life, so that then I'm able to, if I'm a yes, I'm a fuck yes.
This is a great topic in terms of like my line of work, because it's, burlesque is a performative art. And so when people are going on stage, this question of like, why are you performing? Like, what are you actually representing? Like, what are you trying to say? Who are you dancing for? Why are you here? Is something that we have to ask, I think, continuously. And I really enjoy what you said in terms of, it feels as though that's so different for each person, and it I think certainly goes back to the body in a certain way, but getting really clear about what feels good and what just doesn't, what feels kind of yucky. And I was in a really large group recently, a really amazing conference, and somebody was speaking to feeling like they could only be seen, respected, and actually kept safe by the men in the room if they portrayed themselves as a sexual object. And when I heard it, I was like, it really surprised me, because the way that I view my own sexuality is just a completely different lens, in a way. I hadn't formulated like, thoughts around it in the way that she had articulated it. She was feeling as though it was a choice she was making so she could show up for somebody in a particular way to feel safe. And I feel pretty comfortable in my own sexuality, feel pretty comfortable expressing my needs, my wants, my desires, and supporting people in doing that too. And for me, it's like a gift just to be able to be embodied, to be a sexual being, to be able to say that, and actually just for its own sake, like not for any sake other than just to say like, I feel sexual, I am sexy, I feel embodied, and that might look dark, and it might look intense, but it might look really sweet and really awkward and really nervous. But that all of those things are options for me in terms of my expression at any moment, and it's not necessarily related to another person's view of me, but that's not the case for all people. So I think your question of how to start these conversations, I think was a piece of, I can't find it actually. Oh, there you are, yeah. I think that's a really hard question, and it's a good one to be asking in terms of working with people and knowing that it's so different for each person in any given room.
And then I'll just be really brief. I think we need more, the media is dominated by men, and we need more embodied men who are creating films, creating the scripts. We need more women, we need more female voices, we need more diversity in who's releasing what. I mean, there is
the predominance of things that are created for what they consider the average male misses maybe 9/10 of the variety of people and choices that other people make out there. So more empowered people sexually that are creating pieces for the rest of us. That's gonna start that tipping point as well. I don't know how we're all gonna get there, but I can surely tell you that we're trying. You know, but it's like it's a repressed, hard sort of ceiling to break. But I think we need more voices up there.
Isn't the issue really around money with that? Because as the reason that this stuff is developed like it is because they know that there's a market for it, and men are going to buy it. And if women aren't buying it and paying money for it, then they're not going to develop it for that. They're never going to develop it for women or that, you know, the female market. If women aren't actually seeking something like that out. When you look at the soap operas, you know, back when I was growing up as a kid, and there was, you know, they called them soaps because they were targeting women that were at home, able to, or you know, watching it and were doing the laundry and doing the house chore kind of thing back in the 60s, 70s, you know, that stereotype. So, you know, that's a really tough question. It's like, well, how, given that the motivation is monetary, how will anybody change that conversation unless women are stepping up and saying, fuck no, I'm not going to take this anymore. I don't want this. I want something that's different. And they create themselves a market that will drive it. And I don't know.
I'm curious. I really appreciate the question, and I have seen, and I'm seeing one right now, a student in my erotic intelligence class, because I think this arena of tension that you're actually talking about came up pretty fully this semester in our course. So I'm just curious, Claire, are you standing there to comment or to ask another question? What's up?
I was thinking I was going to comment, but and question.
Good.
And then it felt like it got somewhat addressed. But so what happened in our class this semester is we had one class dedicated to the cunt. And what rose, especially like in my body, was like the suffering of the cunt that was beyond me, and that just like, and it's unignorable, right? Like we just brought it up, and we can talk about like the media and how you have to change it, but I'm wondering how you incur it in the work and how you incur it in your life sexually, and what you've done to work with it. And how we touch sexuality responsibly, knowing that that's a huge reality in our world.
For me, it's one person at a time, and just allowing them, allowing them and helping them find their voice and their own body and their own pleasure for the first time. And what was that book, The 100th Monkey or whatever? It's like, you know, at some point, all of us who are so hungry for something different, the one drop here, the second drop here, the third, it's gotta change, because there are way too many people that are hurting and angry because they're hurting, and they don't know how to get out, and they're hungry, and they know there's more, and they are seekers, and they're curious, and thank goodness they stumble upon someone, or they stumble upon a class that's like, you know, I'm totally going to sit in and audit that class, because, I mean, your syllabus alone is cool as shit. But, you know, it's like you stumble across, because somehow we're all releasing that energy of there has to be something different. And then just keep bumping into people, and those that don't vibe with what you're percolating, you find the people that are. And then together, You know, we're all doing our personal evolution, but the more bodies we collect, it can be a revolution, you know, kind of thing. So that just came totally from, I don't know, maybe the heart. Yeah.
Great.
I am. So I'm done.
I would say that from a psychotherapeutic perspective, some of the ways that I've worked with cunt suffering. I had a client many years ago who lost a baby, and her womb and her cunt were so wounded around that experience. And we worked for a long time with, you know, meditation and coming into trying to shift her relationship with this very important part of her body that had suffered deeply. And eventually we got to, she's an artist, and we got to this place where she painted this huge painting. And the body of her was black, and her vulva and her cunt was blood red. And there was something so empowering for her about it. It was like a visual representation of everything that she was feeling. And she felt met by her own work in that moment of reclaiming this part. She didn't want to have sex anymore. She didn't want to, I mean, she was like done with it all. And yet there was some part of her that didn't want to be. So there's from art therapy, from movement, from embodiment, there are ways of, from a Gestalt perspective, it's like putting your cunt out on a pillow and giving it a voice. What does it say? Let it scream if it needs to scream. Let it cry if it needs to cry. And that level of voice that I think is really, really, really important in how we reclaim this part of our body. That book, Cunt Healing, great book. I don't know the word, but it's a great book if you want to check it out. Thanks for the question.
I just feel compelled to add too, having been there, and I think that Claire, in that moment, can I share it well? There was a quality of embodying, and you said it earlier, so I'm not going to share something that you didn't already say, but that Claire's body kind of was a conduit of the cunt suffering. And it was loud and evocative, and it roared, it wailed. And what also occurs to me is how essential it is to have allies who speak for the suffering of the cunt. Whether you have a cunt, a literal cunt, or whether you don't, it's so essential for the healing that it's not just individual, it's collective, right? All the suffering is collective suffering. And so to heal, it's not just through our individual work, which is essential, but also, and I think that's the tension that so arose in our class this semester, which is the social responsibility and the psychological or the personal work. And they need to coexist, and sometimes they create a pretty hefty tension, actually, almost seemingly incompatible in moments, right? And yet, they're so not. They're essential, right? They're like woven together in this incredible cloth that is our healing. So it felt important that I just brought that in.
I'm just grateful that there's a container for something like that to happen. And it, I don't know why, something as you were speaking, I was thinking a lot about my own cunt and how at parties, sometimes somebody will think they can just grab some part of the female body, like without saying anything, and it makes me so angry. It makes me really angry, because they like to look at something, they think they can touch it. It's not okay. And so these little aggressions in the moment, I really, really like to address them when they hit me directly, which feels like I create a lot of boundary with my own sexuality in that way, or the way that I think I sort of have to because of the container that I'm working in. But I think of the container that you were in,
And all of the work that you must have had to do personally leading you up to that moment, but then also having a safe enough space to be able to express that loudly and in that much clarity, and to be witnessed and to be celebrated in that witnessing, that witness consciousness. That all of those things feel so amazing and rare in this world. And I know, like, I really try to create containers for incredible expressions like this, but I'm just feeling a lot of gratitude that that space is there.
And for me, then, I could be the person that Deb was talking about, and for the first 15 years of my marriage, then I maybe had sex 50 times, and it always hurt, and my body was so shut off, and I had no voice whatsoever. And through the process of allies and practitioners, like the work that Dan and Elizabeth do, then I was able to slowly start reclaiming that power for myself, and literally hours of holding my heart, holding my tongue, whispering to my throat, allowing the voice to come that had been stuck down for so long. And so now I enjoy lots of pleasure in so many levels, and I've become so passionate about being able, especially to have women help other women in that. And so one of my offerings is a Dakini circle where women come together and have that space to be able to drop the competition, drop the comparison, be able to hold each other. And then we show a specific technique that's called a yoni massage, of really being able to go in, because our kants, our yonis, yoni is a tantric word for that, is what holds all of this. Any emotional abuse, any sexual abuse, any physical abuse, it's all stored in those tissues, because that's our most sensitive part of our body. And so as you're able to go in and you do just sacred spot touch work, you're able to release, and they release with sound, and they release with emotion, and then you just get to hold each other, and you're there, and time and time again, every single person walks out of that room, whether or not they were the devil model, or they decided to get unclothed and touch one another, or just sat there and watched, they walk out feeling closer to every aspect of their body. And so again, I have so much gratitude to you for holding that container, because it is such a huge space to be able to reclaim from someone that did not have any kind of empowerment to loving my body so much now. Thank you for the comment and the question and your courage to do it.
Thanks, Carole.
Just one thing in my experience that's been really powerful, and maybe if you could comment on it as well, is the power of mutual healing through not just sexuality, well, sexuality in a broader sense of affection, of love, of really both partners being there for each other, which in this case would be the man, unless it's two females, but the other partner being there for that woman, for her continent, for really being able to communicate what is the issue, and then also having healing for that through affection, through love.
Yeah, I would say for me, not having a physical cunt, but in support of the cunts in my life. Sorry, that does but I try to model. I have lots and lots of respect for the females in my life, and try to model as much as I can, where I can. And do I understand exactly what women go through? No, I can't, but I can as much as I possibly can, and support them the best way that I can, through love, support, nurturing, being there for them, whether I understand it or not, just trying to love and support them.
One of the easiest ways, or maybe not easy ways, but one of the things that I've seen given the best results time and time again is just sitting there and being with the person. Whatever's coming up, you don't need to fix it, you don't need to change it, you don't need to shift it. It's just being able to allow them the entire process. Because it's the stories that want to be told, it's the feelings that want to be felt, some that have been shoved down for years and years and years. And so if you're able to just sit there and be with that person, that's all they're longing to have you do, is just be with them, so that they can be witnessed, so that they can have, that it's really okay, that nothing that they could ever do would be too much. And if they're able to sit and scream and yell and cry and like all this stuff's coming up and every voice inside of their head is screaming, this is too much. And you just sit there and hold them and love them and say, is that all you got? Like, it's so beautiful. And it's an amazing space for anyone to be able to have that help for them.
So it sounds like you do this in your relationships. So share it and teach others, because it's an amazing quality. And thank you on behalf of your partners, future or past, because we need more of that. And so do the other people in our lives. It's not a one-way street. So I hope you receive in the same way that you give that love and affection. And that's where it starts. So.
I think I'll pose this one last question, because it's informed by what you just asked. And it makes me reflect on, in psychology, that is my field, that love is studied and understood often in the context of attachment. And that essentially we have two, as human beings, two fundamental needs and desires and longings that can be in competition with each other. One is the need to belong, the need for affection, the need for closeness, and the other is the need for autonomy, the need for difference, the need for one's own space. And so what struck me with your question is kind of the me. Esther Perel, who's written Mating in Captivity, talks about the concept of the me in the we. Right? The me and the we, and how we negotiate in pleasure play, in erotic and sexual exchange, the generosity and the self-centeredness, so both the giving and the receiving, and that wonderful tension, because both actually need to be present. And so again, I have another quote, and I wanted to hear from you all. We need to be able to enter the body or the erotic space of another without the terror that we will be swallowed and lose ourselves. At the same time, we need to be able to enter inside ourselves, to surrender to self-absorption while in the other's presence, believing the other will still be there when we return, that they won't feel rejected by our momentary absence. We need to be able to connect without the terror of obliteration, and we need to be able to experience our separateness without the terror of abandonment.